Okay, I'm stood here today off camera, which I like the best, with David and Jeff, who are, amongst a variety of other wonderful things, practicing pagans. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed. There are lots of religions that people enter into. What's the story about why you ended up as pagans? What's the kind of what drew you towards that tradition?
I suppose for me, for a start, actually originally I come from South Africa, and when I was in South Africa, I met a man who, well, I suppose the best way to call it, had a feeling for the land. Mm-hmm. And so I was quite young then, but in talking to him and communicating with him, I kind of picked up some of those kind of African ideas of spirituality that is within the land. Then when I moved to England, again, almost by accident, I met someone who themselves followed a similar idea. They were kind of interested in the field of the land, paganism, the pagan way. So it kind of drew me more and more and more to it itself. And then when I kind of began to look at it deeper, and actually I mainly looked at witchcraft and Wicca, which is what I actually am as a witch, I found a deeply spiritual religion that one focuses on the changing seasons, the time of the year, but it's also very liberal and very understanding of others. It doesn't try to say to someone, oh, you can't do that, you can't do this, which was something that, as a gay man, was really attractive. You know, where other religions go, as a gay man, you can't do that, you can't be this. Here was a religion that actually went, it's not really something that matters. There is something more important than sexuality that matters when you are looking at something spiritual.
Well, that's really important. Sexuality is really
important. Oh, really? Sexuality is important, but
that it doesn't matter your gender, etc.
Yes.
I suppose it's interesting because, in fact, your upbringing, your parents were not religious at all. You know, they didn't really have any church background. They weren't baptized.
Yeah, I wasn't taught religious at all.
No. Whereas my background is very different. I was brought up Catholic, very strongly Catholic. I went to university, studied theology and philosophy at a Jesuit university. There was a vague thought that I was going to go into the priesthood. I've got family who are priests and nuns and goodness knows what else. So I actually was brought up very, very religious. And actually, I kind of lost my faith actually whilst I was at university. And predominantly it was really over just how unbelievably illogical church doctrine is, and the whole sort of Christos mythology, and it just didn't make sense to me. And the more I studied it, and the more I looked at church history and realised how actually a lot of church doctrine seemed to be almost arbitrary as to why certain decisions were made in certain ways and how they competed with each other and goodness knows what else. And it's kind of, okay, this isn't as spiritual as I thought it was. This doesn't really have a place. And then the final straw for me was then actually, just as I was beginning to realise that I was gay and coming out, there was actually a papal encyclical that was made that actually went, being gay is a mortal sin and you will go to hell for it, which is kind of, well...
So it made it quite clear that perhaps you didn't fit in that.
I certainly didn't fit into this church, possibly didn't fit into any church. It was kind of, well, if that's your God, the God that I've had experiences of doesn't seem to have a problem with it. So, we've made up with each other, so it's fine, kind of thing. So after I lost my faith, I suppose, lost my Christian faith, I'd spent a while doing something that I'm sure you would love, which was exploring all of the New Age and the spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, my favourite, yeah.
Your favourite, yeah. New Age, Buddhism, or elements of sort of Western Buddhism, simple Buddhism and stuff. But mostly actually found that the thing that gave me the greatest spiritual solace, the greatest sort of bearing on life, really, was something that was very rooted in the earth, my environmental concerns, equality, spirituality, that had an element of that deeper spirituality, meditative process, an understanding of ritual, an understanding of community, all of those kind of elements. And in sort of a way, actually, I came to paganism by reading a book, a fiction book, which was The Mists of Babylon, which is all about the retelling of the Arthurian legend, but from the perspective of the women involved. And one of the central characters of that is actually a witch, Morgana. And she's a priestess of the old religion. You know, it's all very pretty and lovely and fluffy and stuff, but actually there was something in that that spoke to me, and I thought, oh, what a shame this isn't real. And then, funny enough, about a month after I finished this book, thinking, wouldn't this be lovely if it was real, I actually met Geoffrey and we were talking about it, and I went, oh, I wish this witchcraft was real. And he kind of went, well, actually it is. There are some people still doing it. And do you want to come round to my place and talk over coffee? And actually, very much like you, it was realising that actually here was a religious path that embraces the individual, but it grounds that individual in the world, in community, in self-empowered responsibility, and it's quite logical, it's quite environmental, it's very deeply spiritual, but it also has this kind of very postmodern sort of edge of magic and fairies and a whole load of other kind of stuff, even whilst kind of in a very postmodern kind of rye green kind of go, well, yeah, except it's probably all psychological anyway, but never mind, it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting, I think. I mean, I think what comes across talking to both of you is that one of the real draws, although there are many kind of interwoven threads you've talked about, one of the real draws is this ethical openness.
Yes.
You know, and it's not so much a shrug of kind of whatever, it's all fine, rather than a real kind of taking inclusivity very seriously. Although we tend to think of paganism sometimes in the way that you finish them, in that slightly less serious way, in terms of we believe things that we are not serious about believing in this very metaphysically kind of concrete way, but we believe that it's important to kind of consider them as metaphors or something. So that less serious sense.
I suppose it depends on a lot of it depends on the pagan you talk to.
Absolutely.
If you're talking to a 16-year-old pagan who's reading Silver Broomstick or what have you, they're probably more likely to believe in the reality of the gods. I mean, we actually used to know someone who very seriously would say that she used to actually hold little tea parties for the god and goddess.
So there's quite a spectrum of belief.
Yes.
And, you know, again, background of Jesuit teaching, I can be very, you know, I'm sorry, but this is not real. You know, this is metaphor. This is etc. Whereas actually, you would probably be a lot more.
I'm a lot more. I'm a lot more open to some of the ideas, but at the same time,
there's room for that.
I think within paganism, some of these ideas that are out there on the edge, possibly if we look at them on a psychological level, they can teach us something more about ourselves. So if we look at the interplay between the god and the goddess throughout the cycle of the year, they're not actually people doing something on some faraway place. What they actually are is they're something that are telling us something very spiritual about ourselves.
So the issue of whether or not you believe in a metaphysical being is almost secondary in terms of what you're interested in. Is the transformative effect it has on the person who's engaged in the ritual or just reflects and meditates on it. So the potential the ritual or the belief has to transform people, that seems to be the thing.
Yes. And in transforming people, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and each other.
There's a lot of that, actually, that is related to the fact that certainly the modern Wiccan movement and certainly the traditional initiatory Wiccan movement that actually talks about itself as being a mystery religion. I mean, back in the day, we used to say that it was, you know, an original and it had historical roots and all that, and it's kind of, you know, Ronald Hutton and all the rest.
Too far down that route before
maybe
you
not sure.
bump into...
But still, that taking that idea of a experiences and roots and metaphorical experiences that enable you to understand a deeper truth than necessarily A plus B equals this. You know, that's kind of where that mystery tradition kind of comes in, and it's purely about transformation and self-transformation, self-understanding, all of those elements.
I also think the fact that now we've reached a point where we no longer cling to it as this is something that our ancestors did. What we've done is we've taken a thread and we're creating something modern. And I think in that fact that we're creating something modern, after all, modern day witchcraft is about 60 years old, we have possibility to create something that's even more positive as we go forward. And because anyone who's involved in paganism or witchcraft, particularly the modern movement, we have that possibility to create something new and wonderful.
Which is also the benefit, I suppose,
yes.
of being in a non-doctrinal religion as well. It's not like we are based like the religions of the book. They're based on a book, they're based on a specific interpretation of a specific historical event. And for a little while there, in the early history of paganism, there was this kind of, it's real and it's true and everyone has to do what Gardner says. But it's kind of moved and grown beyond that, mostly. I mean, you still meet some real conservative, traditional witches who kind of... But mostly, most of us have kind of moved beyond that to being able to go, well, actually, to an extent, all religions are invented in a kind of a way, or have evolved, or have grown, or are expressions of some sort of community identity, or what have you, however you want to define religions. But very specifically, modern witchcraft is, and paganism is, something that is a new expression. It's not tied to anything, so therefore it can continuously evolve and take into account
modern ideas
and technology and quantum physics and you name it.
And more and more in modern times, you're seeing modernizations of old ideas in things like hobby horses, padstow. There's lots of these that we know they were around in the old times, but they're reinventing them, they're recreating them, and it's doing what paganism should do. It's bringing communities together, it's bringing people into those communities.
Which I guess is actually what it's always been. Paganism has always been of the people, by the people, the country, the heathens.
The heathens out on the
We never really had some grand sort of doctrinal idea and church history and stuff. It was really just kind of...
And that's something that point you just made at the end there, talk about community quite so strongly, which I heard you talk about, and it's kind of important, is that if someone just listens to the first half of this interview, they might think, well, there's transformation of the self and there's rituals I can get involved in, but actually you're not merely interested in self-transformation. That seems to be like a tool for community or the world being transformed. It's not just self-help.
Yes.
Very strongly built on that. So you might have that. You feel help individuals and might be good for them, and that's it. But you think it's good in a much broader, a much sort of deeper sense.
Yes.
Thank you.